The year is 1470.
In the mountains of Thessaly, a bell rings one final time across a valley that will never hear it again.
23 women kneel in prayer, their lips forming words they've spoken every morning for years. But this morning, the words taste different.
Like ash, like goodbye.
Outside their stone walled, the horizon bleeds red.
Not from sunrise, but from the banners of an empire that has already swallowed kingdoms whole.
What happens next isn't in any history book you studied in school.
It was buried, erased, hidden beneath centuries of silence. Until now, inside the convent of St. Catherine, Sister Eleni clutches a silver crucifix that has survived 3 generations.
Her hands tremble, but not from fear.
She knows what's coming.
They all do.
The Ottoman army doesn't march like other forces. It flows like a river of steel and fire, erasing everything in its path. And right now, that river is aimed directly at 23 women whose only weapons are rosaries and whose only armor is faith. These aren't warriors.
They're women who have spent their entire lives in silence and prayer, tending herbs, copying scriptures, living in a world so small it fits inside stone walls. Sister Magdalena is 19.
She took her vows only 2 years ago after her family was killed in a raid. The convent was the only place she felt safe since.
Sister Theodosia is 70. She's outlived her abbesses, an emperor, and more wars than she can count.
She stopped fearing death decades ago.
But what's approaching them now isn't just death. It's something the Ottomans have perfected across their expanding empire. Something that leaves no songs, no stories, no memory, just silence. And in that silence, identities disappear as if they never existed at all. The first cannonball is about to hit. The bell that has rung every morning for 140 years is about to shatter mid-swing. And these women are about to learn that what the Ottomans did to them was a conquest. It was something far more calculated. Something that historians are only now beginning to uncover from buried letters and sealed archives. Because what happened next wasn't written in any history book. It was erased on purpose. 17 years earlier, Constantinople fell in 53 days of cannon fire and blood. The jewel of Christendom, the city that had stood for over 1,000 years, was gone. The Hagia Sophia, once the greatest cathedral in the world, was stripped of its crosses within hours. Its mosaics were plastered over. Its bells were melted down for canon metal. Within a week, the call to prayer echoed from domes where hymns had sung for 9 centuries. Sultan Mehmed II stood in the nave of that ancient church and declared it a mosque, not because he needed another place of worship, but because he understood something most conquerors miss entirely. You don't defeat people by killing them. Massacre creates martyrs. Martyrs inspire resistance. Songs are written. Stories are told. The dead become saints, and saints become symbols that outlive empires. No, the Ottomans had perfected something far more elegant. Erasure. When Mehmed looked west toward the scattered remnants of the Byzantine world, he saw wounds that refused to heal. Every church bell that still rang was a declaration. Every monastery that still stood was an act of defiance. Every cross casting shadows on conquered soil was proof that the old world refused to die. And every nun who still prayed in Latin was a living reminder that faith could outlast armies. By 1470, this strategy had been tested across the empire. Greek monasteries in Morea, Serbian convents in the Balkans, Armenian churches in Anatolia. They didn't burn them all. They converted some, abandoned others, let time do the rest. But the pattern was always the same. First came the offer, convert and live under protection. Then came the silence. The convent of St. Catherine, perched on a hillside in Thessaly, far from any garrison or ally, was about to become another test case. Another footnote in an empire's expansion. But these women didn't know they were footnotes. They were about to face an enemy that didn't want their deaths. It wanted their souls. The first cannonball hits just after dawn. It doesn't strike the chapel. It strikes the bell tower. The sound is apocalyptic. Stone explodes into the air. Iron shrieks against iron. The bell that has rung every morning for 140 years shatters mid-swing, and the pieces rain down onto the courtyard where the sisters grow herbs for healing. Sister Eleni doesn't scream. She stands, crucifix raised high, and begins to sing the Kyrie eleison. Lord, have mercy. One by one, the others join her. 23 voices rising against the roar of an empire that has already conquered half the known world. By midday, the gates are breached. Ottoman soldiers pour into the courtyard, but they don't come with swords drawn. They come with ledgers, quills, ink pots. They move through the convent like clerks, not conquerors, counting, recording, cataloguing. Because to the Ottomans, these women aren't people,
they're assets.
A translator steps forward, a Greek man who once lived in these hills. His voice shakes as he reads from a scroll. By order of Sultan Mehmed II, all subjects of conquered territories must submit to the authority of the Sublime Porte. Those who convert will be granted protection.
Those who refuse will face the consequences of rebellion. Sister Eleni steps forward.
Her face is calm, almost serene.
She speaks not to the soldiers, but to the translator, in Greek so clear that everyone understands.
Tell your sultan that we have already given our lives to a king.
We have nothing left to surrender. The officer in charge, a man named Hassan Pasha, whose name appears in Ottoman military records from the 1470 Thessalian campaign, doesn't respond with anger. He responds with something far more chilling, a smile.
Because he knows something the nuns don't yet understand.
The Ottomans have perfected the art of breaking people without killing them.
That night, the women are locked inside their own chapel.
No food,
no water,
just darkness and the sound of soldiers outside, laughing, eating, living. On the second day, a servant enters with bread and water, real food,
clean water.
He sets it down without a word and leaves. The younger sisters look to Eleni with desperation in their eyes.
Sister Theodosia speaks first. They want us to take it, to feel gratitude, to soften. Eleni nods. Then we fast.
By the third day, their lips are cracked and bleeding.
Their hands shake,
but they don't break. Hassan Pasha watches from the courtyard, arms crossed, impressed and frustrated in equal measure. On the morning of the fourth day, he makes them an offer they can't refuse.
Come with us to Constantinople. The Sultan himself will hear your case.
But the road is long, and the weak do not survive it. Sister Eleni looks at her sisters. Some are barely conscious. Some are praying with their eyes closed.
She turns back to Hassan.
We will walk. The smile returns to his face. Good.
We leave at dawn. But that was only the beginning of their nightmare.
They leave at dawn on the fourth day.
23 women, hands bound with rope, walking south toward the coast. No carts, no horses.
Just their feet and the dust and the sun that shows no mercy.
The soldiers don't rush them. They don't need to.
The road itself is the punishment.
By the second day, Sister Irene collapses.
She's 62.
Her knees have been failing for years. She tries to stand, but her legs won't hold her.
The soldiers don't wait.
Sister Magdalena and another nun lift her between them and carry her for the next 3 miles. When they finally stop for the night, Irene is unconscious.
By morning, she's gone.
They bury her by the roadside with their bare hands.
No tools, no ceremony, just dirt and whispered prayers. Hassan Pasha makes a note in his ledger.
22 remaining.
On the fourth day, it happens again. Sister Callista, who hasn't spoken since the siege, simply stops walking. She sits down in the middle of the road, closes her eyes, and doesn't get up. They leave her there. By the time they reach the port of Volos 7 days later, only 18 remain. But something happened on that road.
Something the Ottomans didn't anticipate. The nuns stopped weeping, stopped begging.
They walked in silence. But it wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the silence of women who had already made their choice. Sister Eleni had been walking at the front of the line, leading them even with her hands bound. But on the morning of the 7th day, Hassan Pasha calls for her.
She's brought to his tent alone. What happens next isn't described in Ottoman records. It's described in a letter from a Venetian merchant who witnessed the aftermath.
A letter discovered in 2003 in the archives of Dubrovnik. He writes, I saw them bring her back at dawn. She could not walk. Her eyes, God forgive me, her eyes were open, but she was not inside them anymore. They dressed her in silk and paraded her through the camp as a convert.
But when I passed close, I heard her lips moving.
She was still praying in Latin, silently.
She had not broken.
They had simply taken her body and left her soul to wander. This is the Ottoman strategy that history doesn't teach you. They didn't want martyrs.
They wanted ghosts.
Women who would walk, talk, eat, breathe, but would never be whole again.
Living proof that rebellion was futile.
At the port of Volos, they're loaded onto a galley.
A massive warship with rows of benches and chains bolted to the wood.
A sheep's manifest discovered in 1987 in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace museum lists them not by name, but by number. Religious captives, female, 18. Destination, imperial household. Purpose, domestic service and conversion. That word service is doing a lot of work. The sea journey would break them further. The voyage lasts 12 days.
The sea is not kind. Storms lash the deck.
Salt spray stings their cracked lips. The ship pitches and rolls, and the women who have never seen the ocean vomit until there's nothing left.
At night, Sister Magdalena whispers psalms beneath her breath. Her voice is faint, barely audible over the crashing waves.
But the other prisoners, Greeks, Serbs, Italians, men and women chained beside them, turn their heads to listen.
When the ship finally enters the Bosphorus, the sisters see the skyline of Constantinople rise before them. Domes, minarets, walls that seem to stretch forever. The city gleams in the dawn light like a blade. For centuries, it had been called the city of the world's desire. Now, it would become their cage.
From the docks, they march through narrow streets lined with merchants, soldiers, and slaves.
People stop to stare.
Christian nuns among the captives are a rarity. Even in an empire built on conquest, they're led past the ancient walls, through the imperial district, past gardens where fountains sing and peacocks scream. And then, in the shadow of Hagia Sophia, the great church that is now a mosque, they're forced to stop,
to kneel. As the call to prayer echoes from the minarets, one of the sisters whispers, "We are home."
But it is no longer ours. They're taken to the palace, but not to the grand halls, not to the courtyards where ambassadors walk. They're taken beneath,
down stone steps that spiral into darkness, through tunnels that smell of damp and decay,
to a place that doesn't officially exist. In 2011, during restoration work beneath Topkapi Palace, archaeologists broke through a false wall. What they found stopped them cold. Scratched into the stone, barely visible, were crosses.
Dozens of them.
Small, crude, carved with fingernails or shards of broken pottery. And beneath those crosses, etched in Latin, 4 words, lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. This was their chapel. For months, maybe years, these women lived beneath the palace,
working as silent servants by day,
scrubbing floors, washing linens,
tending fires for rooms they would never enter. But at night, when the palace slept, they gathered in this forgotten room and prayed.
They had no priest, no altar,
no Bible,
just memory.
They recited psalms from recall,
verses half forgotten, reshaped into prayers that kept them alive.
And they carved their faith into stone, one scratch at a time, knowing no one would ever see it.
But the crosses stopped halfway through the wall.
Ottoman records from 1482 mention a cleansing of the palace staff under the new sultan.
Anyone deemed unproductive or resistant was removed.
No details,
no names,
no burial sites.
Just one line in a ledger written in neat Ottoman script. Disposed. The nuns of St. Catherine vanished from history. 18 women who had walked 7 days through hell, who had crossed the sea in chains, who had carved prayers into stone in the dark. Gone. But their chapel remained. A French diplomat in 1712 wrote about a rumor among the older palace servants
that on certain nights, if you stood in the lower hall, the air would grow cold,
and if you listened closely, you could hear women singing in Latin.
He dismissed it as superstition.
But the walls don't lie.
When the archaeologists examined the chapel more closely in 2011, they found something else.
Traces of wax, not from Ottoman candles, but from a different source. Older, mixed with herbs, the kind of candles nuns made in convents.
Which means they kept their vigil for longer than anyone thought possible.
Months, maybe years, carving crosses, whispering prayers, refusing to disappear. Sister Magdalena's mark was the last on the wall. A small bird scratched into the corner.
Beside it, 23 lines, one for each sister. But only 11 lines were complete.
The rest trailed off into nothing.
And beside the bird, scratched so faintly it almost wasn't there, 2 words in Greek, "We endure."
The Ottoman Empire lasted until 1922.
600 years of conquest and power.
They ruled from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia.
They rewrote maps, languages, entire cultures. They turned the greatest cathedral in Christendom into a mosque. But they couldn't erase 18 women who scratched prayers into stone.
Think about that. An empire with armies, cannons, endless resources, and the will to reshape the world, against women with nothing but fingernails and faith. And the women won, not in the way empires measure victory. They didn't reclaim their convent. They didn't live to see freedom.
But they left a mark.
Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness.
Sister Magdalena carved those words knowing she would never leave that palace, knowing her name would be forgotten,
knowing the world would move on without her.
But she carved them anyway, because she understood something that empires never do. You can conquer land.
You can rewrite history.
You can erase names from ledgers and bury bodies in unmarked graves.
But you cannot kill what people carry inside them.
And you cannot silence what they carve into stone.
If stories like this remind you how easily voices can be erased, how fragile truth really is, then subscribe to this channel and keep the past alive.
Drop a comment telling us what moved you most about these women's story.
And hit that like button, because it tells the algorithm that real history, the kind that was buried on purpose, deserves to be seen.
Some voices deserve to be heard.
Even if they were silenced centuries ago, especially then.